What if one of the most celebrated movies in history, the one that steamrolled the Oscars and rewired how we talk about power, control, and care, almost never existed? And what if, 50 years later, brand new plans threaten to flip the story on its head and finally tell it the way the author always wanted? Let's pull the curtain back on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The battles, the secrets, the real patience, the lawsuits, and the rumors that still won't die. By the end, you'll never look at Nurse Ratched, R.P. McMurphy, or The Meaning of Treatment the same way again. Here's the part most casual fans don't know. In 1963, Kirk Douglas bought the rights to Cuckoo's Nest after starring as McMurphy on Broadway. He thought the role was his destiny. Hollywood didn't. For almost a decade, studio after studio shrugged it off as too bleak, too risky, too unmarketable. Kirk pushed anyway, until time did what studios couldn't. He aged out. His son, Michael Douglas, then in his late 20s, stepped in, found independent money, and got the movie made, with Jack Nicholson as McMurphy. Michael says telling his father he wouldn't play the part he'd fought for was one of the hardest conversations of his life. But he also says the film's success and Nicholson's turn ultimately made his dad proud. Recently, on the brink of the film's 50th anniversary, Michael revisited that entire saga, from rejection to Oscar night. The wound was real, the payoff bigger, but it came with a cost. Kirk's dream became Michael's win, and that tension never fully vanished. Next time you watch, remember, off-screen, this was a family drama first. And yes, that tiny company that finally bankrolled the film? Fantasy Films, funded by profits from Creedence Clearwater Revival. Rock money made this movie happen. But that wasn't the whole story. 4 directors said no. Miloš Forman, a Czech émigré who'd fled authoritarian rule, said yes because he recognized the hospital as a metaphor for the system he escaped. To him, Nurse Ratched wasn't just a character. She was the soft, smiling face of total control. He understood the movie in his bones, he said later. That perspective changed everything about how the film feels. It's why the ward never loosens its grip. It's why the therapy sessions feel like performative rituals, not healing. And it's why the last shot doesn't land like tragedy, but like jailbreak. Forman didn't just direct a drama about a hospital. He smuggled in a political parable. And what happened next would shock everyone. No soundstage, no Hollywood bubble. The production moved inside Oregon State Hospital, a functioning psychiatric institution with worn linoleum, flickering fluorescents, and routines that didn't pause for cameras. Dr. Dean Brooks, the superintendent, not only let them in, he demanded they hire real patients as extras and crew. In the end, nearly 80 patients and several psychiatrists worked on the film. Brooks himself played Dr. Spivey, further erasing the line between fiction and life. Michael later laughed about discovering there was literally an arsonist in the art department, but behind the dark humor was something dead serious. The production turned a living, breathing institution into a set. You can see it on screen, and you can feel it, because truth like that can't be faked. And what happened to the actors inside that environment would start to bleed into their real lives. For the first week, the actors slept in the actual wards, followed the schedules, ate the food, absorbed the rhythms of institutional life. Danny DeVito said after a few days they felt institutionalized themselves. The doors locking, the constant surveillance. It works in the movie because it worked on them first. Some went deeper than was safe. Sidney Lassick, Cheswick, reportedly struggled to separate himself from the role. Brad Dourif, Billy, shook and trembled so convincingly and so persistently that staff urged he sleep in a hotel instead of the ward. Even Nicholson, whose intensity could electrify and rattle everyone around him, set a personal boundary up front. No shooting on Sundays, period. His mental reset button according to production lore that's been circulated for years. The lesson was brutal and clear. Playing madness in a place built to contain it can drag you places you didn't plan to go. But one performer turned distance itself into a weapon. Some of these stories live in cast recollections and long-circulating production anecdotes rather than official logs, and have been repeated in retrospectives and fan communities for decades. Most actresses passed. The character was too vile, too cold, career poison. Louise Fletcher said yes, and then built a strategy. She kept away from the men off camera. No bonding, no warmth, no relief. When she entered the room in full uniform, hair lacquered into perfect order, smile tight and unreadable, the set went quiet. That wasn't acting, it was design. Fletcher's parents were deaf, and she grew up hyper-attuned to nonverbal power, the tiny micro-gestures that say, "I control you," without a single raised decibel. So she made a rule. Ratched never shouts. Power isn't loud, it's surgical. Watch her face in the group sessions. Watch her hands. Watch how she wields silence as a blade. Costume designer Aggie Gerard-Rogers even stiffened Ratched's uniform as the movie goes on, turning it into visual armor. That's why Fletcher's Oscar moment, where she thanked her parents in sign language, still stings. She poured real life into that monster, then had to live with people backing away from her at parties. They scared her, for real. And yet, decades later, some viewers wonder, was she a demon or a believer who thought she was helping? The debate won't die, not with the character reborn on TV in 2020, and probably not with what's coming next.
Ken Kesey, who wrote the novel, wanted the story told through Chief Bromden's eyes, like in the book. The film flipped it to McMurphy. Kesey walked. Then he sued. He won a financial settlement and swore he'd never watch the movie. Depending on who's telling the story, he either kept that promise forever or once stumbled across it on late-night TV, recognized it, and immediately changed the channel. Either way, the wound stayed open. He felt Hollywood had gutted his point of view, flattened his vision, and turned a systemic critique into a charismatic star vehicle. For years, that was the unresolved argument at the heart of Cuckoo's Nest. But now, a brand new TV series is in development that finally centers Chief Bromden, just like Kesey wanted. Season 1, the original story, from the Chief's perspective. Season 2, what happens after he runs. If that actually makes it to air, it won't just be a remake, it'll be a correction, 5 decades late. And yes, Kesey, who famously explored altered states, clashed with authority, and openly complained about the film, would probably smile. On screen, the ward feels real, oppressive but weirdly intimate, institutional but alive. Off-screen, the cinematography became a quiet battlefield. Haskell Wexler, one of the greatest DPs ever, started the movie. Bill Butler finished it after Wexler was fired. This was the second time Butler had replaced Wexler in as many years. The first was The Conversation. Depending on the source, much of Wexler's work stayed, with Butler shooting key sequences like the fishing trip and the climax. Both were nominated for the same Oscar. The irony is savage. A film about power struggles has a power struggle baked into every frame, and it shows. The glass walls, the tidal rhythm of sunlight across the day room, the sterile greens that choke the place. Those looks weren't accidents. They were decisions fought for, protected, and in some cases, wrestled away. Listen closely. The theme doesn't open with sweeping strings. It opens with a musical saw, that eerie, bending vibrato that sounds like a spirit trying to break through a wall. Composer Jack Nitzsche laces folk textures, saw, guitar, glass, throughout the score, then contrasts them with the mechanical noises of the ward. Keys, carts, locks clicking. It's the free human sound versus the institutional machine. When McMurphy goes under the treatment, the melody warps and buckles with him. The music isn't just mood, it's metaphor. It keeps whispering, "Remember what freedom sounds like," and then it dares you to notice when it's gone. Here's the layer most people miss until they rewatch. Water equals freedom. The ocean on the fishing trip is the only time the men actually breathe. The river Chief runs toward at the end promises return and rebirth. Glass equals surveillance. Ratched lives behind it, always watching, always protected. The patients are on display like specimens. Color tells a quiet story. Sterile whites and bile green walls dominate until McMurphy sneaks in red. Blood, life, chaos. After his procedure, the palette snaps back to cold control. Reflections mark split identity. Chief is often shown in glass and gleam, separated from himself until he finally speaks and the reflections vanish. Once you notice these patterns, the film clicks into place. You're not just watching plot, you're watching a visual argument about who owns your mind and what it costs to take it back. When Cuckoo's Nest finally hit, it clean swept the Big Five Oscars: Best Picture, Director, Actor, Actress, and Adapted Screenplay. Only 2 other films have ever done that: It Happened One Night and The Silence of the Lambs. The success launched Michael Douglas as a producer, cemented Nicholson's legend, and etched Louis Fletcher's face into pop culture forever. But it had a darker side. Fletcher got typecast. People really were afraid of her. And critics still argue whether the film's portrayal of mental illness helped spark empathy or reinforced a punishing, outdated caricature. Movies don't get to control how they age. They just sit there, letting each new decade interrogate them. And what came next would make that interrogation even sharper. Fast forward to now. We live in a time hypersensitive to how power disguises itself as care, but also weary of demonizing women in authority roles. Some viewers rewatch Cuckoo's Nest and see misogyny wearing a rebel's grin, McMurphy as the cool rule breaker, Ratched as the frigid killjoy punished for doing her job. Others say the film predicted our current conversation about institutional control, forced compliance, and the thin line between help and harm. That debate exploded again when Ryan Murphy's series Ratched reimagined her backstory for a modern audience. And it will ignite once more if the Chief Bromden TV project lands. Each new version shifts the center of gravity. That's the mark of a true classic. It won't stop arguing with us. Over the years, cast members have hinted at scenes so intense test audiences couldn't handle them, and backstage breakdowns that were never just acting. Some of this is myth-making. Some of it is memory hardening into legend. There are whispers of Nicholson being mistaken for a real patient, of actors who couldn't turn it off, of deleted moments that would have tipped the film into full-blown horror. The official record is foggy, and the principals are gone or quiet. But whether every detail is true almost doesn't matter. The fact that we believe they could be true says everything about how raw the film still feels. And now, with the 50th anniversary restorations, retrospectives, and brand new long-form interviews rolling out, the origin stories are being retold, polished, re-argued, and yes, marketed all over again. That's Hollywood. The machine never sleeps. It means the battle between the individual and the system isn't going anywhere. It means kindness without power is useless, and power without humility is lethal. It means the people who tell you they know what's best for you might be right and still be dangerous. It means that sometimes to save someone, you have to do something you can't live with. And it means that the crazy ones are often the only ones who can see the exit. And it means the story isn't over. With a chief-centered series emerging, with Michael Douglas still unpacking the deal that built his career, with fresh debates about portrayal, consent, and institutional harm, Cuckoo's Nest keeps flying. It refuses to land. If you were in McMurphy's shoes, would you fight until they broke you? Or would you keep your head down and survive? Before you answer, think about this. Chief only gets out because McMurphy refuses to sit still. But McMurphy only becomes a legend because Chief decides where the story ends. That tension, the rebel and the witness, the fighter and the survivor, is why the film still owns us. And if the new series finally lets the witness tell the story his way, Maybe we'll learn something we missed the first time. So, what would you do? Tell me below. And tell me whether you think Kesey would finally be satisfied with the version that's coming. Because after half a century of arguments, lawsuits, Oscar speeches, and whispered rumors from the ward, Cuckoo's Nest hasn't lost a drop of power. It's just found new voices to carry it.